And welcome again to Threads from Gallifrey. We have been going on for since September, I believe, with this show, and have really not touched in great detail on the wonder that is Cubicle 7's Doctor Who role-playing game Adventures in Time and Space. We have finally gotten over to Gallifrey ourselves. We managed to figure out where in time and space it is, and we have our Time Lord Dan with us to tell us about this great game. Welcome on.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Cool. So let's start at the beginning. When was the first time you found this role-playing game, and what was your reaction to it?
The first time I found it was actually online. I had heard about it. I can't remember where it was. It might have been through either the Kenzer and Company forums, which I was on a lot, or if it was just sort of a generic gaming news site. But that's when I first heard about the very first Adventures in Time and Space box set for the 10th Doctor. And then I had seen it for sale at Millennium Hobbies and Games in Rochester. The problem was it was an import boxed game and it was $60.
Yeah.
And since we didn't really have anyone else to play with, I didn't really feel justified in spending that kind of money for a game that we really weren't going to use. But once the actual bound volume for a much more reasonable price came out, I said, okay, let's buy this, let's give it a shot, because we're going to gaming cons now, and we're going to be, around other players, and we're going to be playing some new games. And this is, it's a fairly simple game mechanic. So, and it's rather easy to, roll up characters for it. So it was kind of like, all right, let's give it a shot. And so far it's been working out really well. The games that I have been running, besides the Adventures in Time and Space at Conquest last year, which was my game filled up almost immediately.
Yes, it did.
As did yours.
It was a Doctor Who year for us.
Simultaneous games that were completely different, and yet both of our tables were full. But I also had my own homebrewed V20 future game that I ran at UBCon that year, or was it the year before? I can't quite remember. That was completely full too. And I actually had onlookers that were hanging out in back just watching the bizarre madness that was unfolding in the TARDIS, and it was just fantastic to just kind of like sit there and just play this game with other people that just love Doctor Who as much as we did.
Absolutely. I remember when I ran at Gen Con and I ran in, I screwed up into the wrong room, and then I was like, oh no, I got 2 minutes to get there. I ran in like, okay, which is my table? And I looked over, and half the table was in costume. There was absolutely no doubt where I was supposed to be there.
Yeah, I had a few people at my table in costume at UBCon. I had an Amy Pond and a Rose and a 10th Doctor and 11th Doctor and a guy who was actually from England, who, when he actually took over a character, because my table was full by that point, so he just kind of like hung out in back and watched. So when somebody had to leave, he actually took over the robotic dinosaur character that I had rolled up, and he was just so fantastic. He gave it this horrible posh London accent that was just absolutely amazing. I was dying. I was having such a hard time to just focus at that point, because he was just so great and so funny, being a robotic Tyrannosaurus who the Doctor had given intelligence, and he just thought it was funny to just give it this weird posh accent for no particular reason other than it amused him to do it. I had actually gotten that character from the American comic book, and because I have like all things Doctor Who, I buy the comics, I buy the books, I buy all of that stuff, and so it was really great to just like have him just go nuts with it. It was just great.
So what do you think that the Doctor Who lends itself? Why is it a beautiful marriage of this with the role playing game? Why does this work out so well?
Because it's almost anything goes. I mean, you do have certain laws that you can bend, but it's pretty much whatever you can imagine. Just, I mean, you don't even really have any solid rules for gear in the Adventures in Time and Space game. It's basically, okay, well, what can you imagine your character attempting to build? Okay, well, make a boffin roll.
Mm-hmm.
If you can do it.
Or do you have enough story points to completely change the plot?
Right. You've banked all your story points. Just go, you know what? I'm just gonna pool all my story points and just say, you know what? I'm going to just build this and see what happens.
I've never had anybody in the years of running it try to build anything. I keep pushing the boffin, but it's always they always find different routes.
In my homebrew D20 game, it was a story point. I kind of forced them to have to build something to get into the control room to stop the cyber leader from taking over the TARDIS.
So from what I saw with your game Queen City, and from your description, you use the setting with the Doctor companions or new companions that you've created for the Doctor. Is that your preferred area to do it?
Yeah.
Do you recommend other of the other things like a unit setting or a other guy with a tired TARDIS going around? Or what's your feel on the different ways of approaching the Doctor Who universe in this game?
I'm not entirely. I'm hesitant to try a unit setting because if you basically have a group of unit soldiers, you might as well almost not play in the Doctor Who universe. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
If even if you're using either Lethbridge Stewart or his daughter, and a bunch of either characters that you pulled from various episodes of the older show or even the newer one, like say, Martha was part of Unit for a while, you could, she might be part of it, but it's almost, in that case, you almost might not even bother using Doctor Who, it's, maybe if you want to, I've actually kind of really liked the idea of maybe sort of almost going back in time and seeing what the time traveler, that Jack Harkness was his time crew. Maybe even trying that out at some point, because I mean that's a whole backstory that really hasn't been dealt with, and I
Yeah.
think it would be kind of neat to actually do some different time travelers dealing in the Doctor Who universe.
That's the stuff I'd like to see on the show, is meeting the Doctor earlier from an earlier era.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, they can change it to where you forgot.
Yeah, and it's, I mean, especially with Jack Harkness being as old as he is, and in the Torchwood series, it was basically said that at one point he was actually stuck in the Victorian era, so he's been part of Torchwood for 150 years.
Mm-hmm.
So I really don't see why that can't be explored at some point too. Historical Torchwood, as opposed to like the modern Torchwood, which you could do too. But that might actually be rather interesting too.
That would be very cool. I'd like to see that. So, what else have you done? Have you explored any other settings in the Doctor Who universe with it, or have you gone mainstream Doctor and Companions? Where have you gone with it?
I've mostly done Doctor and Companions, but I've always done a twist on it. Like thus far, many of my games, because they've only been at conventions, they pretty much have to be sort of a runoff adventure. It's not entirely the Doctor, or it's like in my last game at Queen City Conquest, it was the Doctor, but it wasn't the Doctor because it was all a dreamscape that it was sort of being constructed in Amy's head, that was kind of through the TARDIS was being transmitted to everyone else. So they were all experiencing the same dream. And
cool.
So that's how Day of the Triffids got kind of mixed in because she had seen the movie when it had aired on the BBC, and somehow she was having a nightmare about it. And so the actual Trifid plants were on an alien planet, and they were attacking them. And that's how I like to do it. I don't like to do it like a straight up, here's the doctor, here's the companions, and we do that. I think I'm going to do that this time around, though. I'm currently writing a new adventure for the upcoming Queen City Con. That is more or less going to be a straight doctor and companions, but I'm thinking of allowing my players to choose which doctor they want, and from that doctor, then you get to choose which companions you're allowed to have.
Nice.
You better choose. If you want this doctor, just be aware you're going to have his companions, his characters that he's interacted with to choose from.
I want Ian Chesterton.
Huh?
I want Ian Chesterton, the man who gets knocked out more times than anybody.
Oh God, I don't even know if I'll have all the doctors available because I really only have 2 doctor source books at the moment. Mm-hmm. But I love the idea of having Tom Baker's doctor, or maybe even the 8th Doctor, because the 8th Doctor was only used in the War Doctor special, besides the actual Fox movie. And so that might be kind of nice to get sort of either a doctor that either hasn't been used very much, or one that is actually beloved by people, even though they may not know a whole lot about him, is actually really kind of fun.
Hi, Garrett.
I forget the actor's name for that doctor, but I remember the first time I saw him, he was in Alien 3. So now when I watch Alien 3, I keep wondering, is he really the doctor? Put himself in that situation.
I've seen the first Alien movie, and I've seen, what was it, Alien Resurrection or something like that. I've seen Aliens, but I gotta be honest, not really a giant fan of the whole oogie boogie monsters jump out and kill you kind of a thing.
So what parts of the game, what is about the mechanics that you like about this system? What do you want to, for people who haven't played it or got a chance to read the book, what makes the Doctor Who game the Doctor Who game?
There are rules, but there are ways around the rules. It's probably there are rules, but you can get kind of bendy with them, which is great, because you've got kind of like this core group where you've got rules that say you need this number to actually be able to understand what this alien is saying, but let's tweak that a little bit by adding some story points and change that up a bit. And it's a good game because it can bend to what you need it to be.
You like how fluid the rules are.
Says the voice in the background.
My husband.
Bigger, your TARDIS is bigger on the inside.
The TARDIS is bigger on the inside, yes.
What else about
you see the wall of DVDs, but there's actually much more.
What else about the rule? One thing that really amazes me that I tell everybody about this game is how the initiative is the show. How the talkers talk, doers do, or runners run, and then fighters fight. Like, that is every episode to a T. I've never seen anything that fits the property so well.
It does. It's because Doctor Who as the show is dialogue based. It's entirely and completely story and dialogue based. So when something happens, basically it's like, okay, we need to talk this out. And that's your very first action. That's the first thing you do. Or you immediately either duck or run. Those are those are the first things you think of before you even think of fighting in Doctor Who. I mean, guns are dangerous. Guns hurt people. Let's not deal with guns.
And Centaurians or Daleks have a very, very large amount of armor
Yeah.
that you probably are not going to get through.
Yeah. It's when you've got something like Daleks that you need a ridiculously high number to hit because their armor is just utterly unpierceable by normal means. That I mean, what are your options? Try reasoning with them. Yeah, okay, they're Daleks, or run.
Or a sonic screwdriver to make their ship's gravity go off very quickly.
Or something like that. Yeah. Yep. It's something very Doctor Who.
How have you seen your players at your tables respond to that initiative? Has it clicked to them like, oh my God, this is it, and have been able to run with it because the rules help them be into that mindset of what the show is? Or is it the show, it's just a reinforcement of what they know from the show? Have you seen it played out in that way where people are not going into fighting mode, but are actually going into talking, thinking, running mode?
I think it's a little bit of both. That they sort of expect that the first option isn't to fight. That it's just one of those things. It's just not that kind of game. It just isn't. Combat isn't really expected in Doctor Who, except for specific circumstances, or you really have no other option. I honestly, most of the time, I kind of like pinning creatures that the players just don't really have a snowball's chance in hell in fighting, because it forces them to have to think. And I just like doing that. In a game of Doctor Who, you can do that. I mean, that's basically how the show operates.
Yeah.
You have this big bad monster that you have to outsmart in some fashion.
Definitely. Have you taken a look at the older Doctor Who games like Fasa's Time Lord and things like that?
Wish I still had that.
My husband had it. He had gotten rid of it at some point long even before we had met.
Sold it to Chrissy Igor.
It had gone by the way of getting sold to a local gaming store before it had been sold off and became something else.
So I've been looking at fan-made adventures for that, and they're like space dungeon crawls where even with the Dalek adventures, you are expected to fight the Daleks and it'll clear the rooms. And I'm like, have you not seen Doctor Who when you wrote this? Who in their right mind would do that?
You might as well just not play Doctor Who. You might as well just play like a standard pen and paper RPG and just go around slaughtering orcs for that matter. I mean, it kind of boils down to pretty much the same thing if you're just going to do that.
Exactly. And also, you can't shoot the Doctor would not do that. It's just not with the attitude.
No, the Doctor. I mean, kind of the whole point of the end of the Ninth Doctor, when he went to go throw the giant kill switch to destroy all the Daleks, he couldn't. It's not him. That's not who the Doctor is. So if you actually have a dungeon crawl scenario where you're just going through and killing everything, I mean, that's not really Doctor Who.
Even the War Doctor at the end couldn't do it.
Exactly.
So
what do you recommend for people who are love their Doctor Who, their Whovians, and they're gamers? What's the first step for them for getting into this? Should they get their feet wet? What are your recommendations for getting them into this wonderful world?
Do their homework. Go online, go to forums, talk to other people that have played the game. Get their honest feedback. Ask them what you think. Is it worth it? And go to a convention. Check out an actual game. Even if you don't sit in on the game, just sit back and watch and see how it plays. I mean, that's always an option besides actually just going out to your local bookstore and or your gaming shop and just buying the actual RPG.
Mm-hmm. And also things like online games like Roll20. Keep a lookout, see if somebody's running it, and even if you aren't comfortable with playing it or it's full, ask if you can watch it and see what it's like.
Yeah, that's always an option too.
And that brings me to kind of the through line from all the people I'm talking to for this episode. On the Cubicle 7, who makes the Doctor Who game, in the One Ring specifically, there was a gentleman who posted saying, I'm not a GM, but I love the One Ring game, and here in the Midwest, I want to have it played more. So I went to all the local game stores, said, hey, can I run it? They go, yeah, sure. And now I realize, oh, I'm running a bunch of games, and people I don't know. I'm not a good GM, and my confidence is off. What do I do now? What would be, if he was going into doing Doctor Who, trying to do that, what would be your advice for that?
Part of it is sometimes you just have to dive into it. I mean, even though he isn't extremely confident in his GM skills, nobody else might be either.
Geronimo.
I mean, exactly, Geronimo. Just dive right in. Honestly, the best thing that you really need as a GM is to be able to think on your feet. It doesn't matter what the adventure says in front of you. If somebody can throw a wrench into your entire plan and you have to think on the fly, that's the biggest thing for a GM. You have to be able to think quickly. That's all you really need.
Especially in this, besides Paranoia and Toon, I don't think there's been any other game I've seen where it requires that kind of being able to go, or where your preparation, you really need to do minimal preparation and have a few set pieces and just let the players play.
Yeah. For Doctor Who, when I write up an adventure for it, I write up my general scenario, any flavor text I want to include, like the actual setting. Like in my last adventure, I basically described an extremely hot planet. You wake up and it's morning, but it's slowly getting hotter throughout the day. And I have, some basic specs of locations on my sheet, but for the most part, I had 3 pages total. That was it. And I whatever the players said they were going to do was essentially what happened. So people are blindly wandering through the forest trying to find people, and they were actually going, Margot, Polo, at one point because the fog was so thick they couldn't see anyone. So that's essentially how they found one another, was actually basically playing Marco Polo in the fog until they found everyone, and then they basically slowly moved their way through until they found the building that they were eventually going to find. And what happened would be what they dictated was going to happen. Like I had a list of supplies that was inside the building, and if they chose to do anything with them, then that's what would happen. They actually managed to essentially build a big bomb with some fuel for a jet engine and a detonator, and that's how they essentially destroyed the Triffids. But it was still mostly, I just sort of thought it up on as we were going along, that this is what was happening. Here's specific details when you need them, but otherwise, whatever the players did would be what I would react to.
How, as a GM, did you get yourself to that level? I mean, how did you get to be that flexible of a mindset versus people who are GMs that are very old school and have the grids and the dungeon crawl, specific rooms and specific stats for everything? How did you get yourself to that area of that flexible thinking?
Many years of being a GM. it's not that I don't have those dungeons. It's not that I don't make those dungeons. It's just that lately, because our gaming time has been so sporadic, and sometimes you just don't feel like doing a particular type of dungeon, or you feel like doing the previous adventure. You just feel like doing something else, or you're just, quite frankly, lazy, which, let's face it, happens more time than we actually want to admit. Mm-hmm. You just pick up the monster manual or your game, and you just, okay, what do you want to do? Let's do it.
What would be the equivalent version of that for Doctor Who? For the monster manual and random dungeon, what would you do for that? Few people say, "Hey, let's do a Doctor Who game this Friday night," and you're like, "Yeah, sure." You bring in beer, sure, cool, and then you realize, "Oh, I have to do something." What would be your approach to that?
I would do like some episodes have either ended or begun with the Doctor looking to his companions and saying, "Where do you want to go? When do you want to go?" And bam, let's do it.
Good answer. What's been some of your favorite moments from the games you've run for Doctor Who?
Oh, wow. One of my favorites was when I before I actually had the Adventures in Time and Space game, when I was running it as a D20 Modern / Future game. I had actually used River as a little girl, as a player character from after she had been taken, and she knew who the Doctor was, but she knew that she couldn't really do anything to his time stream yet, so she decided to just hang out and observe. And then when it came time for the group to have to build, suddenly she's a genius and she snaps in, and it was just fantastic because they were using the robotic dinosaur, as I had mentioned earlier, as a cannon. They built a weapon in his mouth to essentially melt down the blast doors that the Cybermen had built to keep the Doctor and his companions out. And that was probably my favorite because the player that was playing Kevin the dinosaur, he actually kept his mouth open while she was in there, while she was supposed to have been in there building the weapon. And when he was trying to say something, he actually just kept his mouth open. He went, as he was trying to talk. That was probably one of my favorite moments.
Have you done any historic ones? We've gone to any world history where those episodes?
Not really. I kind of like doing the fantastic time and space, outer space, alien kind of a thing. Something different. Mm-hmm. It's not that I'm not interested in doing a historical kind of an adventure, but we're playing Doctor Who. Let's go out and do something different.
Mm-hmm. I couldn't resist doing an adventure at a con where it was the Battle of Thermopylae, and Daleks were picking one side, and Cybermen were on the Persians as the Invincibles.
Oh yeah. I think my husband played that game, but I was not there. I had a different. I don't remember what it was. It was either a panel or a different event or something that I was at. I think he played that game, and I was there for a few minutes to essentially sit in and just listen. Mm-hmm. But I do kind of vaguely remember that.
That was a lot of fun. So, what do you want to see in the next episodes of the next season of Doctor Who? What are the things you're wanting?
Wow. That's a hard question to actually answer. I honestly, I have some problems with Moffat as the showrunner. I just do. Like him or hate him, I personally don't think he's as smart as he thinks he is. He thinks he's brilliant. But there have lately, especially with the actual anniversary special with the War Doctor, there were a lot of things that just made me go, why? You have the Doctor is talking to, Rose as this invincible, intelligent weapon, and all she did was just sit there and watch. What was the point then? If all she's going to do is just sit in the background and not do anything, I mean, what was even the point in having Billie Piper there if she's not going to do anything? And David Tennant's Doctor, I don't know, there was something off about the way his Doctor was acting.
I noticed that too.
The way that he was, I don't know. I just wasn't happy with it. It wasn't necessarily Tennant's portrayal, because he was still, trying to be that energetic, yeah, let's go do this, Doctor. But at the same time, he was having a long-term affair with Queen Elizabeth.
Yeah.
What? What? I actually, that just made me go, no, that's wrong. That is wrong on so many levels. I'm just been so unhappy as a whole with how the show is being written. Individual episodes have been great, especially guest writers, like Neil Gaiman.
Yes.
His episodes have been amazing. And his Doctor and his characters have always been on point as the Doctor. But many of Moffat's episodes just, they feel like they're missing something. The Doctor doesn't necessarily feel like the Doctor. And there seems to be this almost underlying bitterness about the Doctor and the entire concept that just isn't sitting well with me. And I'm actually kind of hoping that the rumors are true and that BBC is looking for a new showrunner. Honestly, I'm kind of hoping that those rumors are true.
I think on any show you got to have change. You got to have a major change every 4 years on any show to reinvent itself. You can't let it get.
Or it just becomes stagnant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you feel about Capaldi?
I like Capaldi. I like Capaldi a lot. I'm kind of really like that grumpy, like kind of ticked off Doctor. He reminds me a lot of the first Doctor.
Yes.
He really does. He's just kind of like this grumpy old man he's just tired. He's just tired of this nonsense that's happening. And I kind of really like that, especially after Matt Smith's and Tennant's Doctors, where we kind of like go back to like Eccleston, even Eccleston, to his sort of like really kind of grumpy, bitter Doctor.
Well, he had a horrible, a big reason for that.
Oh yeah,
the man who pushed the button.
And I really kind of like Capaldi. I think they kind of played up the whole Scottish thing a little too much at first.
Mm-hmm.
Like we don't. Okay, the Doctor's not a Scot, all right. He's from Gallifrey. Yeah, okay, we can mention that suddenly his accent's a little weird, but we're actually the whole Scot joke was being played a little too much at first. It's gotten better, but yeah, I just didn't really think it was necessary.
About my issue with this last season is, like, especially during the middle of it, I started to really dislike Clara. How have you felt about that?
Clara kind of has the same problem that many of the companions today are facing, in that they all have to be special. They all have to, they're human, but they're not human, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
Like River Song is essentially a Time Lord.
Yeah.
She just is. She's essentially a Time Lord. The even Donna Noble, to a certain extent, when she was
She became a doctor, essentially. Yeah.
she became a doctor, and everybody seems to have this superhuman quality. All the companions now seem to have this, but that's not what the companions are supposed to be for. They're supposed to be the average person that the doctor goes with. They're supposed to be the ones that are amazed with the giant swirling galaxy lying before them, like Rose Tyler was. She was stunned to see the sun enveloping the earth when the doctor showed her the end of the world. And she was scared and terrified that this was eventually going to happen. And I really missed that. I miss the companions being human.
So now we've had several years of this, several generations of companions, per se, in this area from Donna Noble forward, even Martha to a degree. When we have these players coming to our tables, and if we were doing a campaign wanting to build companions, they would not be like typical companions that we know of. They would be based off like these very special companions. How, as a GM, would you handle that situation?
I actually, more or less, I tend to try and keep the companions balanced. Like in the last game that I ran, I actually told my players up front, you'll notice River Song is not part of this group. There's a reason for that, because she'd essentially be a second Time Lord. And there was no Jack Harkness, at least no Jack Harkness that was invincible. I like the idea of having Jack before he became immortal as part of the game, because then it forces the player to have to go, okay, this isn't invincible immortal Jack. And they can't just run in front of a Dialect and get shot and provide and be a distraction for everybody else to run. So they actually, so that's part of it.
There have to be consequences.
There have to be consequences. That's why I don't mind so much having someone like Clara, even though at least Clara at first, a younger Clara before we learn about her being a part of the Doctor's overall history and being there for all of his events. She's basically practically immortal too, because you kill Clara and there's a new Clara from somewhere.
It's like a player who goes, okay, my next character is going to be named Clara.
Right.
Then I slightly change her last name, and the GM just says, fine, whatever.
Yeah, you don't even need to change the character sheet. It's like, okay, here's my new Clara.
Yep. I like thinking of the episodes in these ways.
It's just I prefer balance to all of the characters. I don't like characters that overbalance, an entire group, because one person's playing River Song, and then basically, not only is she a Time Lord, but she's got, she's carrying her psychic lipstick that she can use to charm anyone, and she's carrying her sonic screwdriver and her energy blaster, and she's basically a combination of Jack Harkness and the Doctor.
Yeah.
And I as a whole, I'm not happy with River's song. Now, when she was first introduced, I liked River. But as she went on, I really didn't like her at all.
With the use of her as the tool in the thing, or just the way that they were having her play out? Is they're reversing the relationship?
Yes. All the things.
All of the above.
All of the above.
The one moment that really caught me with her, though, was where she realized that she was having her first kiss with the Doctor to realize that in her timeline there would be no more. I found that as very touching, though. That was like one little thing that stood out to me. That one made me go, "Aw," a little bit, and then reach for a beer.
Oh, that was sad. Okay, moving on.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that's kind of how that episode played, though. Is that, oh, that's sad. Okay, let's completely forget it and move on.
Exactly. We have more monsters.
Yep.
What recommendations would you give for GMs for using the Doctor? Would you let people run the Doctor or River Song in there, or would you recommend that they hold those guys as NPCs because they're so game breaking in their thing? Is just let the Doctor use a sonic screwdriver. Could be the answer to 90% of things, unless you said it. Hey, at the Battle with Thermopylae, where there are no devices.
Yeah, right. Most of the time, I have either the Doctor missing, completely MIA. I'm running the Doctor as the GM, or just like you said, something isn't right. Either your device doesn't work for whatever reason, or you don't have your screwdriver, or say it's even at the end of, even if you're, say, running the 10th Doctor, and it's right after the episode where he's in the hospital and he destroys his sonic screwdriver and he hasn't replaced it yet. So there are ways around it, but so I don't mind so much the idea of someone playing the Doctor. I prefer at least the person playing the Doctor to either have a fairly decent knowledge of the actual series and of the Doctor specifically, or to be a veteran of the game. That way they know how it works. And you don't get a newbie who's playing the Doctor who goes, I don't know what to do.
And what are all these traits? And that's why I like it on the guy who's dressed like the Doctor going, you know the Doctor, you don't need to worry much about the traits because you know the Doctor.
Sometimes, yes. As long as you know that Doctor and you're aware of his traits and of his good and bad. Because, you kind of want to play, you want to make sure that the bad traits are played too.
Mm-hmm.
But so it's kind of, once again, you've got those fluid rules where you can bend things a little bit. So having an inexperienced player with the Doctor is fine as long as they know about the Doctor.
Nice. And my last question for you, story point awarding for role-playing. How much is enough to reward somebody who can play, is a theater person and can actually act out as the Doctor? And how do you cut that off or respond to that for the people who are really good at that? I just like, it's character idiosyncrasies. Like someone's playing Jack Harkness, and as long as they're playing Jack Harkness as Jack Harkness, you know what? Hit on that horrible, gross, three-headed alien. Story point for you. As long as they play the characters, and they play the characters well, or they do something absolutely unexpected yet brilliant, story point. But not throwing out the standard catchphrases. You're not going to just say Fez and expect a story point.
Right. It's just the Doctor shouting Geronimo or Allensy, you don't get a story point for that.
Cool. Well, thank you, Time Lortena, for talking to us today about this, and hopefully next time we can talk some more about your favorite Doctors. I know you've got some of the source books, and talk about a little more specific about building the games more specific to your favorite Doctors.
Yes, love to.
Excellent. And thank you very much.
You're welcome.